The Starweb Journey, Myths and Dreams, Book 1, written by Michael Henderson, Jr. Chapter 1, Astra, Universe, U311, John's Earth, September 7th, 2035, 8 a.m. For the last 2 weeks, Dr. John Aurora had woken with the same sick feeling. It started with the screams. 1 trillion of them, by his own private estimate. Though estimating the precise number of voices in a dream you could not remember was the kind of math even he had to admit was nonsense. They were already fading as he opened his eyes, the way nightmares always faded, except these did not fade all the way. They left a residue at the back of his mind, like the afterimage of a bright light. He could feel them through the day, faint and distant, the way you can feel a city humming through a hotel room floor. He kicked the covers off and lay in the dark. He wiped sweat from his brow. He took several long breaths. Is this a message? He shook his head. Nonsense. Dreams are dreams. But this one would not let go of him. It was different from the others. The trillion voices had been in every dream of the last 2 weeks, but this one, last night's, had carried an image with them, and the image was still here, sharp as a slide held up to a lamp. A man, sitting alone on a moon in deep space, watching a live feed from satellite telescopes scattered across the galaxy. On the screens before him, in terrible slow motion, the universe was ending. Worlds flying apart. Suns going unstable and going nova. Random black holes opening out of nothing and swallowing everything they touched. And John, or someone wearing his face, was somehow to blame for all of it. The last dream always slipped away, just as he reached for it. This one had not slipped. It was still here. It had been here all morning. He had been trying for the last hour to put it down. It would not be put down. He stared at the blank ceiling and waited for his heartbeat to settle. What he could remember of the other dreams were the other lives. A boy with extra memories, skills beyond his years, saving his friends in a world that had gone horribly wrong. A young woman in uniform, a soldier running a secret mission on quantum computers, not unlike the ones he used, always thinking of her son, always aching for the moment she could return to him. But the most persistent dreams over the last 2 weeks were about the same 2 people, Joshua and his wife Rana. They looked just like him and Elizabeth, but their life together was simpler and lighter and somehow more real than anything he had built. Over these weeks, he had found himself living inside their choices, feeling what Joshua felt. And for the first time in years, he was eager for sleep, just to see what they would do next. Joshua was a very different person from anyone he had ever met, and his simple life reflected it. He was a laid-off contractor whose job search hadn't gotten him far until recently. He was not formally educated. He did not have the whole world depending on his next choice. Although this other self had made little of his career, he had to admit that Joshua had made a life. In that life, he was simply happy. Joshua would have called this feeling a gut feeling. John had no use for gut feelings. They were useless, non-quantifiable, and confusing. Reason was simple, straightforward, and it always led to greater knowledge. Pure scientists use their brains, not their guts. A wave of nausea came over him as doom grew in his stomach. He had to set his mind on a task, or he would drink again. Today's critical test on Astra forced the dreams to fade in a wash of anticipation. It's time to get up. His bed was comfortable but small. He had built it into the wall years ago, after Elizabeth left with the kids and it became clear he would be sleeping here indefinitely. He stood, took the covers off the floor, rolled them across the bed, and tucked the sheets, smoothing out every stubborn wrinkle. After fluffing the pillows, he waved his hand and the panel closed, concealing the bed behind decorative wood. His bedroom became his office again. Everything he needed was here. In the back was a small kitchen he never used. The bathroom, his private smoking room, and the bar were a different story. For those restless souls on his team, the smoking room had become a public rest area. It was necessary because now that Astra was turning, there was no time to walk endless hallways through security and outside just for a smoke. In light of the threats they had received, the city had given him a special permit. The bar was his refuge when long work days became long work nights. 2 weeks ago, after Astra's superconducting magnets turned on, Kayla told him he didn't need any distractions. The bar closed. That day, Phase 1 had begun. He remembered it clearly. The team had spent hours placing the S-matter into the arm pods, the rounded containment vessels sitting at the widest points of Astra's 2 great scimitar arms. The pods were engineered to carry that extraordinary substance at temperatures only fractions above absolute zero, cooled to a Bose-Einstein condensate, stable and quiet as frozen starlight. He had been placing the last of the S-matter into the final pod himself, moving carefully around Astra's white arm when he lost his footing on the access step. He threw out a hand to catch himself, and his palm came down flat against the outer casing of the arm. Astra moved. The magnetic field responded to the energy transfer. Her 7.5-ton body, which had never moved under its own power, which had taken 15 years to build, began, with terrible slowness, to turn. His single touch was the only energy she had ever received, and she had not stopped since. She was spinning at 1 rotation per hour now, hovering on 9 electromagnetic ball bearings above the ground, riding a field of superconducting pulse magnets, turning without friction in the near dark of the lab. And that night, the dreams had started. He tried to ignore them at first. They weren't the real problem. The real problem was that these other lives, Joshua's life, the soldier's life, the boy's terrible world, were making him aware of his own feelings. He had spent his entire career ignoring his feelings. They were unreliable. They had no equations. He put his clothes on, walked into the bathroom, and placed the plaque neutralizer between his teeth. His thoughts drifted back to Joshua. They looked the same. Their minds were very different, but at heart, he suspected, they were the same person. The plaque neutralizer beeped. He set it on the shelf and pressed the self-clean program. He checked his hair in the mirror. A few more gray hairs on the sides. He took a long look at the person looking back at him. That person said, without words, "You lost too much to stop now." He looked away and went into the lab. Astra was humming. He stood in the dark and felt her vibration deep in his chest. She was exactly 42.84 feet tall from the base, a perfectly round sphere larger than a dump truck, clad in the purest titanium alloy ever forged. Below her equator, 9 great ball bearings of hardened steel alloy held her 428.1 millimeters above the floor, riding their cushion of superconducting electromagnetic force. She hovered without touching anything, spinning in the silence, and the only sound was the deep, low thrum of the magnets underneath her. From her equator, 2 great arms swept outward like scimitar blades, one black, one white, each curving halfway around her circumference and ending in a blunted point. At their widest reaches, the containment pods sat, rounded vessels, sealed and pressurized, holding the S-matter that would change everything. The pods had not moved since Phase 1. They were still. They were waiting. Around Astra's body, the antimatter engine spiraled like a glass serpent, compressed so hard under force that it had grown stronger than the metal it resembled. A faint purple glow pulsed along its length. The antimatter inside it, patient and dangerous, waiting for the moment it would be released. That moment was tonight. The plan was simple, in the way that dangerous things are simple. The electromagnetic ball bearings would accelerate gradually, spinning Astra faster and faster, from her current 1 rotation per hour, building toward millions of rotations per minute, until she reached the maximum velocity the experiment required. At that point, the antimatter would be released into the engine. Astra would accelerate toward ever higher fractions of the speed of light. She would begin to create and direct temporal anomalies. That was the experiment, as far as the military and the officials were concerned. Detect, measure, and map the anomalies. Confirm the equations. Make history. John knew there was more to it than that. There always had been. He had fed the military what they needed to keep the funding flowing. The real purpose of the experiment was larger and stranger, and he had not told anyone, not even Kayla, what he truly expected to happen when Astra reached full speed. He wasn't entirely sure himself. His equations pointed somewhere he couldn't fully name. But there is more to this machine than I was told to build, and more than I have told anyone else. He stared at her, turning in the dark for a long moment, listening to the hum. Then he heard the screams from his dreams again. Faint, distant, 1,000,000,000 voices at the edge of his consciousness. And he set his jaw and went to make coffee for his team.